Hello, everyone, and welcome back with round three of the Eternal Weekend in Prague. Here with Skora, we're bringing you all the action from today's Legacy main event. We have 10 rounds of Swiss, followed by the top eight tomorrow. And I believe we might be able to look at the standings. Obviously, it's a little early in the tournament, only 2 rounds played so far out of 10. I think we're looking at roughly the 9-1 record to make it into the top eight because there's a lot of players. I think the event was sold out probably a week or 2 weeks even before the actual event. The event capped out at around 750 players. So, if you see any of your friends at the top of the standings, it's still a little too early. But obviously, if you're sitting at 2-0, you were definitely thinking that the tournament's going great so far.
So Martin, if you're playing a 10-round Swiss event, what score do you think you need to actually top 8 this event?
So most Swiss tournaments are done in a way where if you have one loss, you're going to make it into top 8. So I would be thinking lots of people, that equals me having to go X1. If you start, 8-1 and losing, the round number 7 or 8 or 9, something like that, then you probably have good enough tiebreakers to consider drawing in the 10th round. But I think we're mostly going to be looking at a bunch of 9-1 players, perhaps someone with good tiebreakers taking a draw in the last round.
Okay, so it's super difficult to actually top 8 this event. Like if you need to go 8-1-1 or even 9-1, you know that the players who top 8 are literally the most skilled players who have metagame properly for today. Also, the mental tax: 10 rounds of Legacy, 10 rounds of brainstorming, 10 rounds of doomsdaying, or playing against doomsday has to be absolutely, mentally taxing.
Yeah, we have Yacoo Huso there in 7th place. I think we are going to have Yacoo in the feature match this round playing Temur Rhinos. This is a deck that you would mostly expect to see in Modern, where it is one of the top 5 decks of the format. But yeah, here in Legacy, it is also a thing. You are using cards like Elvish Spirit Guide and Simian Spirit Guide to power out your Cascade cards a little bit ahead of the curve and get your Rhinos into play, obviously backed by those interactive cards like Force of Will and Force of Negation.
Yeah, so most of the deck list really overlaps with the modern version, but you've got 4 Endurance, great against all the Reanimate and the Scam decks as well, against Murktide, although you would have to do it before it comes down. Brazen Borrower, great catch-all against anything that could happen, but we've got full 8 copies of free counter magic, 4 Force of Will and 4 Force of Negation. Even Fire Ice made it in, so you can do the classic, upkeep, tap your land, and then go. So, yeah, very interesting take on the deck. 3 footfalls there, and we will see if we can maybe see some Rhinos on turn 1. Maybe, who knows?
All right, on the other side of the table, we have Stefan Schutz playing what looks to be a 5-color control. So it is another Up the Beanstalk deck, playing cards like Leyline Binding, Uro. I believe there is typically the One Ring in these kinds of decks. There's also 4th Eorlingas. I see Terminus, Lorien, Revealed Ponder. Yeah, so a pretty typical deck now, playing black for Orcish Bowmasters, white for the Fairy, green for Uro, and I think there's red for the Eorlinga. So this is going to be a match where Stefan is definitely going to be looking for the Fairy or counter magic. If he has the Fairy in play, that completely stops the Cascade spells from working because you can actually resolve the card you Cascade into. So the Fairy is a card Stefan is definitely going to be looking for and then trying to protect it. On the other hand, Yacoo is going to be looking for counter spells to try to stop the Fairy and force the Rhinos through. Obviously, as many Cascade cards as possible. Other than that, this should be a fairly exciting match because unlike some of the other matchups, things don't just happen on turn 1 or 2. This is going to be players playing lands and trying to dance around each other's counter magic and try to resolve something on turn 3 or 4.
Yeah, it's one of these matchups where we will see Orcish Bowmasters from Stefan, but Bowmaster doesn't do really much, right? It doesn't block profitably the Rhinos. He doesn't stop the Rhinos. There's only one Teferi in the main deck, so what Stefan needs is the Terminus, which we had spoken about, and Force of Will or Force of Negation outside of these cards. The rest doesn't do much. Leyline Binding answers only one Rhino. Maybe Uro could be a way to power through them, because when you get it on the board, a 6/6 Uro, having gained 6 life, drawn 2 cards, can certainly stabilize. I think the speed also will matter, because like if Yacoo has turn 1 Rhinos, is going to be much, much better than if you'd played on turn 3, walking into a very natural Uro. So here we see the mana base. We see the Xander's Lounge as the Triumph of choice, which is complemented by Savannah. Sometimes you have, maybe Ketria Triumph and then a different jewel to complement that.
All right, looks like we are off to the races.
Oh,
Yacoo
wow.
starts with a crashing Footfalls on turn 1, just simply saying, hey, I think this game is gonna go longer than 3 turns, so I'm just gonna get the value from Rhinos 4 turns down the road, and in the meantime we're gonna be playing some lands, we're gonna be countering some spells, but eventually I'm gonna get 2 Rhinos. So suspends the card. I think that this is a very fair use of the card. Obviously you want to get it out of your cascade cards, but if you think the matchup is gonna go longer, then there's no issues with suspending it on turn 1.
Yeah, and speaking of slow matchups, we see Mystic Sanctuary just play tapped on turn 1. So not only a land producing a single color of mana, which we don't see in Legacy, but also tapped, which we certainly don't see in Legacy. We might see turn 3 Cascade, classic play pattern that you might all be aware of, familiar with. Third land searched up from Lorien revealed. And Stefan, we can't really make out what's in his hand. And that's really important.
It's funny how a card like Lorien revealed, that when you first see the set, you would not think that this would be one of the most impactful card, for the Legacy format, right?
Yeah,
Like how does a card like that do it all? You get to find the right duels. You get to shuffle your deck after you play a Brainstorm. You can pitch it to Force of Will. We saw in the last match, Mark Tobias was able to use Carpet of Flowers to just power out a bunch of Lorien reveals on turns 3 and 4 and just draw a bunch of cards. So yeah, one of the at first glance unlikely card to change the format, but it really has.
So I've got a question to you, Martin, then. If you could play, let's say, 20 Lorien reveals, how many would you actually play with the ratio lands to Loriens?
Oh, where's the
Yeah.
the
Where's the line?
The line? What I would do is I would just message Frank Karsten, and I would be like, hey Frank, I have a question. Whenever you have 10 minutes and a napkin, could you please calculate this for me and then get back to me? This is what I would do.
Yeah. So because in practice, the thing is that, first of all, Lorien is still a tap land, right? Because you need to spend mana to get it. And you always need that first land to get the chain going at least, right? So you need to work these things into the equation. But yeah, the fact that it's pitchable to Force of Will is certainly huge. The fact that it's hardcastable, as we saw in the Mark Tobias match, hardcast twice.
It's an early game card, fixes your mana. It's a late game card. It works with Brainstorm, really does it all. And as we mentioned, this is a matchup. Both players are only playing land so far, probably sitting on a bunch of counters. Now we're gonna see a situation where does Stefan want to be the first one to blink? Try to hardcast his Uro, Teferi, something along those lines. That would open up the possibility of Yacoo just untapping and playing one of his Cascade cards. But we also know that Violent Outburst is a card that Yacoo can play at the end of Stefan's turn. So Stefan is kind of incentivized to do something, because if he only just plays lands and never casts anything, at some point Yacoo would be able to cast Outburst, maybe induce a little bit of a counter ward, then untap and play another Cascade card and get his Rhinos into play.
Yeah, now we see red-green jewel fetched out Tiger. an outburst in response to the draw. So let's see if Stefan has something. Now, it's crucial because it plays around Force of Negation, but it still possibly walks into Force of Will.
Yeah, notably, Force of Negation says that if it is not your turn, you can use it for free, which works really well with Violent Outburst. So if you want to induce the counter war at the end of your opponent's turn, you can use both of your forces.
Yeah, but as Stefan, as the phone player, he cannot phone this because it's his turn. So yeah, so it benefits Yacoo, but it doesn't benefit Stefan. So let's see if there is any response. There isn't. Uro resolves. I think right now we've got 2 cards in the graveyard, or maybe 3-ish. I'm trying to count if we can bring back Uro as soon as next turn. It might be doable, but it's going to be tough.
So it looks like the Rhinos resolved, which puts Yacoo firmly ahead in play with 2/4/4s. Now we know that if you're not playing red and instead you're using the white removal spells, you are going to have access to Swords to Plowshares, Leyline Binding, cards like that to try to deal with the tokens. Obviously, if you have to use 2 cards to deal with one of your opponent's tokens, you're essentially getting 2 for 1. Oh wow, and yeah.
And we've got Minsk and Boo on the battlefield immediately with a hamster.
What is that card doing in the deck? You don't get to pitch it to force. It doesn't really do anything with Cascade. Is this just a great card to play if you're playing red green sort of mid range deck? This you could say that this is a sort of aggressive mid range deck. Is Minsk and Boo just a great value card?
Yeah, Minsk and Boo has been played in a lot of decks just as a 4-mana planeswalker. I've seen multiple 4-color blue decks that don't even play Jace the Mind Sculptor, but they play Minsk and Boo. Because when it enters the battlefield, you basically get a 4/4 hamster attacking the opponent, and then you can cash it in and deal that 4 damage to anything, and then draw 4 cards, which is kind of unreal. And in this particular deck with Simian Spirit Guide and Elvish Spirit Guide, it can come down as soon as the first turn of the game. Now we see Force of on Teferi falls back.
Yeah, welcome to Legacy.
Yeah, so I think Stefan actually had Teferi earlier, but he was setting up a situation where he knows it resolves. And now we've got Teferi, bounce one of the Rhinos, then removal on the other Rhino. But then there is Minsk and Boo potential. Okay, Ponder. Interesting. Interesting dynamic. We'll see how this develops.
So if you're the 4-color control player or 5-color control player, and this happens, what are you looking for? Like, is Stefan just in a situation where he needs to find a terminus that he is going to need to try to play during Yacoo's turn after the second Rhinos resolve? How do you deal with the Planeswalker? Like, what are you hoping to? What is your game plan right now? What cards are you looking for?
Yeah, there are 2 game plans I really want to achieve. One is Terminus, and the other is Escaped Uro. Now, the order is important. You don't want to Terminus after Uro. But so just Uro might be enough. Just Terminus might be enough. Terminus into Uro should probably be GG. Now, because it draws cards, stabilizes your life total. Now, you can't be too confident because if you just have Uro, Yacoo can Alpha Strike you and just kill you through Uro. For example, right now, Stefan's at 5, but he set up Terminus. That's really huge. If there is a land, we could see Uro escape, but we do not. There is some question about about Minsk and Boo, which we are not sure what that is. Leyline Binding takes care of Minsk. Empty battlefield, and Stefan is just waiting to escape Uro.
All right, Leyline Binding deals with the Minsk and Boo. Now Stefan looks to be stabilizing at 4 life.
I'm still trying to think what happened there, but there may have been like maybe miscommunication. Like Terminus resolved, Stefan passed the turn, forgot, eat Miskenbu, and then Yacoo put the hamster into play from the upkeep trigger. So maybe there may have been some timing miscommunication.
All right, brainstorm. 3 new cards for Stefan. Puts 2 back. Would like to have a fetch land here to shuffle it away. But what he really wants to do is bring that Uro back into play.
Yeah, and Uro is completely dominating there.
Is Yacoo out of cards?
No, he's got I think 1 card in hand, so now 2. There could be something like Brazen Borrower.
Okay.
So we've got Orcish Bowmasters. Orcish Bowmasters coming into play. Yeah, so Stefan might actually be stabilizing at 4, which is the classic life of a control player. You can go down to as low as 1 life, and there are no repercussions.
Yeah, you can use your life totals as a resource, and Uro is the perfect win condition for this deck. Not only does it draw you cards, 6/6 is also usually dominating the battlefield, but you also gain some life back.
Yeah,
There it is.
Exactly.
So this puts Stefan to 7. Now he's going to be able to start drawing more cards. He's going to be able to start attacking, and Yacoo looks like he's out of gas.
Yeah, so this is the main play pattern of Uro. So you try to play it on turn 3, then forget about it, and then bring it back at some point later, because it doesn't really matter when. And the worst part of Uro, I've seen multiple people say, is the fact that you have to cast the front half.
Yeah.
Even I remember playing Uro in like a Thought Scour deck to just mill it over and just be able to play it on turn 6 from escape immediately without having to play 3 mana for an Explore. Okay, so because okay, I guess we've got the Lorien revealed hardcast stream today.
I think we should have like a counter that keeps track of how many times the Lorien revealed has been hardcast. I think it's been more times than it has been cycled so far. This is at least the 3rd or 4th time somebody hardcast the part where you draw 3 cards instead.
Yeah, exactly. This is actually insane. Yeah. I've seen it hardcast way more just today than I've seen in Modern overall that I've played.
All right, so Stefan firmly in the driver's seat now. Uro drawing cards for him. Yacoo would need to draw into a Cascade card, try to double block the Uro, but even then the Uro can just come back. Stefan is able to fill his graveyard pretty quickly now. He has a Bowmasters. There's a token in play as well. And Yacoo says, okay, well, I've seen enough. Scoops it up. That puts Stefan to 1-0. Or was this game number 2?
Yeah, that was game 1. Yeah, 1-0. For Stefan, I think if Yacoo's plan is suspending Rhinos into turn 3 Rhinos, it just walks into Terminus way too hard. So he needs these opening hands with like Elvish Spirit Guide and just turbo it out, especially on the play.
How big of a difference is knowing your opponent's deck list, in a matchup like this? Like, maybe you were thinking you could be on the version with Delighted Halfling, right? That typically doesn't play too many sweepers or any sweepers at all. So in that matchup, I would be inclined to try to turbo out my Cascade cards. If you saw Terminus game 1, is that going to change how you play in, after sideboard? Like, would you maybe consider boarding out some of these Simian Spirit Guide or Elvish Spirit Guide cards out?
Yeah, I think what I would like to know from Yacoo's side is, as you said, the number of sweepers and counter spells. From the Stefan side, the number of possible alternative win conditions. So, for example, I would like to know if Yacoo has Blood Moon, which he does. Or maybe if he has other weird planeswalkers in addition to Minsk and Boo. Because it might turn out that banking on Terminus is just not enough, right? Or any other engineered explosives and these types of effects. So, I mean, the deafening silence, maybe. So, Stefan really would like to know what possible threats Yacoo might have in addition to Rhinos. I can see Yacoo siding out Brazen Borrower, Fire Ice. There's an interesting card in the sideboard, and that's Inevitable Betrayal, which is a cascade payoff, which allows you to search the opponent's library and put a card onto the battlefield, creature card. So basically, it's I think Bribery is the original card, which is great against, for example, decks with Atraxa, with Progenitus.
Okay.
We won't see it here because unfortunately, if you steal Uro, it would still die and even land in the opposing graveyard. So that's not something you want to do.
So what do you think both players are looking for in their sideboards for a matchup like this? We saw how important Carpet of Flowers was earlier for Mark against the Grixis player deck. Is this something that Stefan wants to bring out of his sideboard for a matchup like this? Or, is the extra mana on his own turn not as relevant here? And is this matchup more about him stopping the Rhinos or him trying to find, his Teferi or something along those lines?
I think it actually comes down to your even previous question about open deck lists, because if they were open, Stefan would know that Yacoo plays basic forest, basic mountain, taiga. So it's possible that Carpet of Flowers would just add 1 mana, maybe, or maybe 2 mana potentially. So it might not be that effective, especially in the face of Blood Moon. So that's one thing to consider. So Carpet might just stay in the board until you reevaluate for a potential game 3. Or you can bring it on the draw speculatively to get that boost in mana because you're on the draw.
It looks like we are underway, Yacoo, with a multi-6.
Oh my god, I see double or triple guide Blood Moon.
Wow, and the downside of playing Blood Moon on the upside of playing Blood Moon on turn 1 in Legacy is that your opponents are gonna have a lot of fetch lands, and those are not gonna do anything.
Wow.
You don't typically have a lot of basics, but there are cards like Lorien Revealed. So Stefan actually, with his island straight up in his opening hand, casts a Ponder. But I have to imagine that this is a pretty big deal. If Blood Moon comes on turn 1.
It's a huge deal because there is nothing else except for that island that would produce non-blue mana. So looking at the deck list, I'm not sure why he would continue playing the game. Oh, okay, no, okay. There is one reason: Hydroblast. If that had been sided in,
Okay.
That's literally, yeah, absolutely, literally the only card that can take him out of this situation.
No.
So,
there is. I see a basic planes in Stefan's deck as well. So
I missed it. Okay.
If he gets both in play, he can cast the fairy. Maybe he's going to be able to save up enough lands for Leyline Binding. So there are ways for him to get out of this spot, but it is definitely not a good spot to be in.
Yeah, the fact that there is this basic planes that I didn't see is huge. But now from Yacoo, we see turn 1 Blood Moon, turn 2 Shardless, empty-handed almost. But that's the draw you want to have. Also, Shardless is particularly better than Outburst because it puts 10 power on the battlefield. Rhinos and Shardless.
So it's a 2-turn clock instead of 3, right? Yeah. Or 4 or 5 or whatever, depending on which kind of removal your opponent has.
So I've got a question to you. Let's say you ponder, like Stefan did, and you see another ponder or another cantrip in that pile. Do you keep it to try to dig next turn further, or do you shuffle?
Yeah, that just depends too much on your hand, right? That there's way too many things that come into the equation when you do that. It also depends on the number of outs in your deck. Am I specifically looking for one certain card, like a Teferi or the Leyline Binding in this situation, or that one planes? How many other ways do I have to find it? So way too much stuff that would go through my head to just tell right away if I do this or that.
Yeah, and now we see Brainstorm on the stack, I think, in response to Crushing Footfalls. But I don't see any counter magic or a basic planes. So if Stefan actually locks himself, that would be GG if there is no counter.
Yeah, funny how that works. This is not just a Temur Rhinos deck, but thanks to the Simian Spirit Guide and Elvish Spirit Guide, you can also power out Blood Moon on turn 1. So you could be a prison deck sort of after sideboard, against these decks with greedy mana bases, which is most of Legacy.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's why, as you mentioned previously, people play like a single island or a single swamp to be able to play both through Wasteland and Blood Moon. But fetching out that island, yes, it allows you to play cantrips, but you're still far away from actually doing anything meaningful. An attack for 10 might be coming across. Yeah, Bashu, down to 10. Oh, peek at the top card. Stefan draws. Stefan scoops.
I think
Wow.
peeking at your top card, that kind of has to be your default if you are playing Miracle cards. It's just good to get used to that and just do it every time. It does kind of waste a little bit of time, but you don't want to be the player that draws their Terminus into their hand and then realizes, oh, wait, I was supposed to Miracle this. So, yeah, it's a little too late for that now. So, yeah, just good force of habit. But Yacoo takes game 2. And we are tied 1-1. Is there anything out of the sideboard that might change based on whether you are on the play or on the draw? Like we saw earlier that, for example, Delver is a lot better on the play against an Orcish Bowmaster's deck than on the draw, because on the draw you can play it and right away your opponent has the ability to play their land number 2 and kill it by dealing 1 to it. If you play it on turn 1, you might be able to flip it before they can even play their Bowmaster. So is there anything like that dynamic that usually comes up in a control versus control battle or control versus mid-range, control versus combo? Is there anything else like that?
Out of all the cards that I can see both players are playing, I think Fire Ice is the main one that actually affects that dynamic. So, for example, Fire Ice is much better on the play of Ice specifically. But I'm not sure that Stefan will be changing anything much because he's on the play. I think maybe it'll change the range of hands he keeps, but it won't change the sideboarding too much. He still wants, Terminus maybe even in hand to brainstorm it away. He still wants to have access to Teferi. He certainly wants to have access to one of 6 free counter spells. Actually, 7 post board. So if I was Stefan, I would be really tempted to try to mulligan into those counter spells. But then if you mulligan down to 5 and find it, after you force, you're left with 3 cards. Not much gas left in the tank. So it's a very weird line to tread.
How many ways does Stefan have to stop something like turn 1 Blood Moon? There are 4 Force of Wills, and there are 2 Force of Negations. After sideboard, are you expecting something like a Force of Vigor now that you saw Blood Moon? Do you expect anything else that might stop you from doing something like that on turn 1? I'm trying to think, if I'm Yacoo, how much should I be relying on this kind of powerful play on turn 1? What if my hand is 4 lands, double Spirit Guide, and a Blood Moon?
Oh, wow.
Is that a keep? Like I'm basically all in on my Blood Moon. Is that something I can do against a deck that has 6, 7, 8 forces possible on turn 1? Possibly a white land right in play already into something like Leyline Binding. What do you think?
That's a good question. I can bet that in the moment as Yacoo, I would be tempted to keep this example of the hand on the back of the fact that it won me the previous game. Whoa.
Wait, that's on Stefan's turn 1.
That's Stefan's turn 1 upkeep, I think.
Oh my god, is this really
okay?
happening?
That's unreal. That is literally unreal. Wow. And Force of Negation doesn't do anything.
Yeah, because it's Stefan's turn. Wow.
Yeah. Ponder. Yeah, Ponder. Yeah,
okay, well, keep in mind that Ponder can set up a Terminus, so Yacoo certainly with pretty insane start. Wow. But now Stefan is definitely going to be looking for that Terminus or a way to put it at the top of his library.
Yeah, and I think there was Flusterstorm in hand. So because it was done in upkeep, it could not have been played.
Yeah, timing matters, and it looks like Yacoo knows exactly what can happen. Great call to not let Stefan even play his first land and just do that in his upkeep and put 2/4/4s in play before you even do anything.
Yeah, now he did pitch 3 cards to be able to play it. So Stefan could actually try to play through it with just manual like swords to plowshares.
Mm.
The issue is that he might just not have many post board, because why would you keep many swords, in principle, right? So Stefan could try to grind through it, but he might not have the tools to grind through it. Another Rhinos, and I think 2 cards in hand for Yacoo.
Right, this is a matchup where you would rather focus on stopping your opponent from resolving the Rhinos rather than have too many ways to try to deal with the creatures, because every Rhinos brings two tokens. So if you want to deal with them one for one, you are kind of down on that exchange. So it definitely makes more sense to try to stop it from resolving. But I do see at least one copy of Swords to Plowshares in Stefan's hand.
Yeah. I think he's considering Loriening on upkeep. Okay, he opts not to. Another fetch on top. Okay. So he has 1 swords. I mean, it halves the clock. I actually think this sword is huge.
Yeah,
Absolutely huge.
that buys him so much time.
So he got hit once, right? So he's at 12 right now. A sword on one of the tokens and the other connects down to 8.
And Stefan waiting with the swords to Yacoo's turn to make sure he doesn't get to use a force of negation to fight over it.
Yeah, that's a good catch, yeah. So Stefan is at 8 right now. His fetches down to 7, if I'm counting correctly. 8 and 7 doesn't make much of a difference, right? Because you're still dead to 2 attacks off of Rhino. It would make a difference if Stefan was at 5 and fetched down to 4. Trop is defined. We'll probably see a Lorien as well. Oh, no Lorien. As you said, peeking at the top card. So would you feel confident if you were Yacoo in this particular spot?
I've been thinking about it, and I think you have to go for these all-in plays. I think that's just how your deck is set up. Would I feel confident right now? I mean, my opponent is on a 2-turn clock. Like you mentioned, it certainly makes sense for them to have more counter magic and less direct removal spells. So, yeah, I would also be thinking, yeah, they just play 1 swords. They probably don't have the full 4 in their deck after sideboard. So good chance, if they don't find Terminus, I'll be able to just connect with this twice. But I would still be very nervous because this is my last thread.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I actually, now thinking about it, I'm not sure that was a keep, and I'll tell you why, and you can tell me if you agree with me. So when you're looking at 5-color control, let's say you assume your opponent has removal, counter magic, or a mix of both. If they have counter magic, this all-in play is terrible because you walk into force of will. If they have removal, it's also pretty average, right? Because a single swords to plowshares halves your clock. If they have a mix, then it's probably even worse. So it kind of doesn't really like either. Like it basically a keep that relies on the opponent literally having nothing, or hoping that Stefan kept a hand of like cantrips and Urota Teferi, right? And that's what it really punishes. Would
Yeah,
you agree with that?
yeah. I think you just have to do that though. The longer you wait, it's not like the matchup is going to get better, right? If you give your opponent too much time to play their card selection spells and perhaps find a Teferi or get into play even, then it's certainly not going to get better. So I like these all in plays. Obviously, this is a very unusual case of Yacoo having a turn 1 violent outburst on the draw before Stefan even plays his
Yeah.
first land. Like that is not something you're going to see every day. But I certainly like doing that in Yacoo's spot because he needs to make these plays as early as possible and put pressure on the opponent before they can, start getting their value cards on.
Yeah, and there is the second Swords to Plowshares. There will be another Rhinos coming down, another set of Rhinos. A crash of
I think the
Rhinos.
swords was reused with the Mystic Sanctuary.
With the Sanctuary. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, there's so much going on in Legacy, like so many nice, cute interactions. Like you can fetch a land, or even I think in this case it was him cycling Lorien Reveal to get that sanctuary to get
Yeah.
the swords back and kill the other token.
Okay, Lorien revealed hardcast counter 4. I have to update it then.
Okay, okay, okay.
Lorien revealed hardcast tracker. Yeah, I want to keep Twitch chat, up to date with this development.
I think the use of the card is really just split sort of pretty evenly into the 4 ways you use it, right? About a quarter of the time you pitch it to force, about a quarter of the time you shuffle your deck after a brainstorm, about a quarter of the time you just use it on turn 1 to get a land, and about a quarter of the time you just cast it to draw 3 cards. So everything super relevant on the card.
Yeah, I think you want to hardcast it especially more if you play a deck that has free spells to then unload them with after Lorien revealed, because after all, you're still tapping out for it, right, on turn 5. So it's a really prohibitive cost to have shields down. But if you can draw off Lorien, let's say Force of Will, blue card, something, then you're pretty happy.
Yeah, and Stefan is also using the fact that Yacoo doesn't have red mana here. So he knows that there is not going to be any violent outburst shenanigans at the end of the turn that could put more tokens into play. There is still something like Brazen Borrower that can happen from Yacoo, but
Yeah.
there's probably
Now,
not too many of those in the deck.
how afraid or how much would you be playing around something like end step pitch Simian Spirit Guide Outburst?
Yeah,
Because there could be red mana, right?
that is a possibility. One of them was already used earlier, but I think, I mean, if you are in a tight spot, Stefan was at, I think, 3 life already. If you are finding yourself in a pretty big disadvantage, you generally can't afford to play around that many cards. So at some point, you just have to say like, okay, well, you didn't have the outburst last turn with the Spirit Guide, so I'm just gonna draw my 3 cards here. Try to, really come back to the game. Try to find my Uro, gain some life back, and make it so that I'm not all of a sudden losing to your top deck Brazen Borrower or even your end of turn outburst. With the help of a Spirit Guide, because now my Uro brought me to whatever it is, 8 life. Now I have a blocker in play. Perhaps I'm gonna find some more removals. So at some point you have to do that.
So now we see force on Leyline Binding. Leyline Binding in response. Oh, okay. Question to you then. Why would you play Leyline Binding in response to Fawn and then Fluster, rather than flustering immediately?
So Leyline Bind was
Yeah.
put to deal with the token, Force of Negation, and
You just want more storm count, right? And then just in case, one more storm, and brainstorm on the main phase. Yeah, so let's see what he's trying to find. Okay. Okay, so put them to back. And I think we're preparing some Uro mana, and that should slowly be the end of the game. Yako still no red mana. I'm not sure even if there are ways to get rid of a resolved Uro. We saw some borrowers sided out.
Yeah, I think Stefan hit the point where he was able to draw enough cards, find the removal, and now he's slowly turning the game around. With Uro in play, he has a big blocker. The tokens are gone. Now he's going to be able to start attacking. That means more Uro triggers, more card draw triggers, more lands in play, more life, and there is not that much Yako can do, in this position. Not even having red mana.
Yeah, I think Yako will be extending their hand soon enough.
It was a very exciting game. Like the start from Yako
Yeah.
was very impressive. Unfortunately for him, after that he found himself in an awkward position of not really having too much of a follow up. But that's the cost of using 4 cards from your hand on turn 1. So you're left with 3. So you have to make some land drops. Like obviously the rest of your hand can be ideal.
Okay, so we see that revealed. Stefan is at 8. Oh, and that gets flustered. So there is no combat math to be thinking about, whether some alpha strikes can get it done. Fluster pretty clearly says, well,
So,
that's GG.
someone in the chat pointed out a funny fact. Once a control player starts playing faster, you know that they're in a position where they feel the win, right? Like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
now I stabilized. I don't have to be too worried about trying to play around everything and really calculate every each of my move, with surgical precision. Now that I have Uro in play, drawing me cards, I'm like at a pretty safe life total. I can, start playing a little bit faster, and I don't want to say careless, but there's not that much that can happen where you'd be like, oh wow, I didn't think of that. Now I'm completely dead.
Yeah, and now even more mana being tapped. Now, even if Stefan didn't have a draw step, I think he'd be favored. Okay, so
Yeah.
what happens? So what happens here, Martin? You've got Uro. You play another Uro.
Yeah, 2 legendaries in play. Obviously, you can choose which one you're keeping, but the trigger still happens. So the second Uro comes to play. You draw a card, gain some life, make a land drop. Obviously, Stefan chose to keep the one that was already in play, so he doesn't have to bring it back again, and just got some value out of his card.
Yeah. It also happens with cards like Emery, where you play the other one just to dig deeper into your deck to find more artifacts, but you keep the one you'd played earlier that doesn't have summoning sickness.
Right.
So it does happen that you have to actually tactically play out the other legend. Misk and Boo would be much better if Stefan was still at like 6. Oh god, and even gets negated. So just giving Yacoo no hope. Still attacks in, for good measure. What could get him out is maybe like petty theft on Uro Anta Blood Moon. I'm just trying to think of a sequence, so that could be a
Right.
sequence.
Yeah, I think now Stefan just has too many cards in hand at this point. I see a Force of Negation that can be hard cast. That Uro is going to be able to outrace the agent very easily.
Yeah. So in this fight between two Simic creatures, Uro will be the one coming out on top.
Lorien revealed cycled there. Looked like Yacoo was waiting for a 5th land, but unfortunately has to cycle it, get another land. That can signal having another Lorien revealed in hand, perhaps, where you just want to get that 5th land and know you can cast it next turn. But I think the clock is ticking, and at this point, it might be a little too late to spend your entire next turn casting Lorien revealed against an Uro attacking. And I think there is another Force in Stefan's hand, so he does have the next 2 spells covered. Yeah, Uro is a very good recurring threat that if the game goes long, you're going to be able to just beat the opponent with it, because it keeps coming back, it keeps giving you more cards, it keeps giving you more life, it helps you stabilize. It actually puts the opponent on a very fast clock, as opposed to some of the other threats we keep seeing in Legacy. And yeah, that's it. Stefan wins game 3, moves on to the 3-0 record with his 5-color control deck. So congratulations to him. And I believe we have another match waiting for you. Brian Koval with his 4-color control, again featuring Up the Beanstalk, playing against Death and Taxes. What I'm curious about is this mono white Death and Taxes, or is this white black? Because this is a deck that historically, in the past, we saw this deck almost always being mono white. Sometimes some variants would splash a Magus of the Moon in the sideboard. But now that Orcish Bowmasters is a card, I think most of these decks switched into black and white.
Yeah, so you're asking if it's mono white, and I will tell you it's not even blue black. It's not even white black. It's Mardu, because it splashes red on top of black. For example, Magus of the Moon, the card you've just mentioned.
Okay. So thanks to Recruiter, you can afford to splash for some of these silver bullets that you can find. Sometimes you have either vials, sometimes you don't even need to find the the right colors of mana, you can just cheat the card into play sort of that way.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a Yorion deck as well on top of that. Now, Brian Koval is a well-known legacy content creator, might be the biggest legacy content creator. Bosch and Roll, also known as that. Beautiful deck, all black bordered jewels. If there is anybody in the field that's my front runner, it's certainly Brian Koval.
Okay, I'm gonna pick Javier as my person to select as the most likely to do well, or to most likely to top it, because Javier is just a player that has so much experience, and I just know that he's going to be prepared and he's going to know what he's doing.
So I once heard an anecdote or a comparison which really stuck with me. If your life depended on it, would you choose Magnus Carlsen playing some random opening in chess, or that opening champion or master? And you would probably bet your life on Magnus playing that opening rather than that opening master. And by the same token, it makes sense that you're picking Javier as, let's say, the Carlsen of Magic, instead of the legacy, the format specialist. Although I think legacy is a deep format where the specialty knowledge can come really a long way.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like if you put LSV, or if you put Polo, or one of these top players that perhaps don't play legacy as often into a legacy tournament with no practice, then I might still pick a legacy person, a legacy specialist over them, because as you mentioned, it's a format with a lot of weird interactions. You need to know the format. You need to know the corner cases, scenarios, and to really be proficient with your deck. So I agree with that. But back in the game, we have a sort of a locked board. There's an Orcish Bowmasters, annoying Brian a little bit, Solitude, Stoneforge Mystic with, is that Cauldron complete in hand? Is that a Batterskull? Is that Swords of Fire and Ice?
Yeah, I can't really see, but there is a lot happening. And as you said, clogged up board. Pernicious Deed, a card we saw Petr also play. Okay, we'll see. Very careful, Brian. Thought sees you, and now we know it is Batterskull indeed.
It's funny how Death and Taxes went from one of the most played decks in the format by just printing Orcish Bowmasters. Like, how big of a deal is it for this deck? They already got Spirit of the Labyrinth from most of the versions, but you are still playing Mother of the Runes. You still have Flicker Wisp. You still have Talia. So you have way more X1 creatures in your deck that you would have liked. How big of a deal is it for this deck that Bowmasters is such a big part of the format now?
Yeah, I think it's a big deal, because on top of everything you've mentioned, and you've already mentioned a couple of cards, there is a Recruiter of the God that dies. There is Samwise from Lord of the Rings. That's a 3-off in Gabrielle's deck, and it also dies to Bowmasters. So I think it's really, really tricky. But for example, if you play turn 1 Giver of Runes on the play, you're actually kind of Orcish proof, because she can protect herself and any other creature. So it's not unplayable by any means, but it is tough. It is tough. But on the flip side, Orcish Bowmaster will genuinely get 1 trigger, not many more. So you can actually play through it. You can, with Yorion in the deck, with so much card advantage like you have with Samwise and a Recruiter of the God, your own Orcish Bowmasters. Yeah, I just want to say that on average, like you're getting more mileage trigger-wise from Bowmaster against the field than the field against you.
Right. It's interesting also that you mentioned Samwise, the Stout-Hearted.
Yeah.
Which is another card from Lord of the Rings that kind of just fits pretty well into some of these legacy decks. Here, Gabriella can use Samwise in combination with Wasteland, for example. Wasteland my opponent, get the Wasteland back as it went to the graveyard. You can use a fetch land to find something, then use Samwise to bring it back. Sometimes your opponent's going to use a removal spell on your creature. You can bring it back that way as well. It combines nicely with either vial. So that is another very cool card that was added into this deck from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, certainly. You could also have weird combinations like them killing your Bowmasters, you bring your own Bowmasters back, kill their creature in return, and get even more value out of all of that. You also get to be tempted by the ring, which is just icing on top of this Death and Taxes cake.
It's interesting seeing Pernicious Deed, back in action. I remember that
Yeah.
card from way back in the days. Now you see that card in pre-modern a lot, but now seeing it back in Legacy, I don't think it destroys planeswalkers, right? It destroys like creatures, enchantments, artifacts, something along those lines.
Exactly these three. Yeah.
So at some point we stopped seeing players using Pernicious Deed because, well, it's kind of outdated and it doesn't kill planeswalkers. But now we started seeing some of these 4-color control decks use it again. Good thing is it doesn't destroy your own leyline binding, despite you casting the card for one mana most of the time. It's going to be able to completely clean up here and destroy Gabriella's board.
Yeah, although Gabriel has a full hand, right? Batterskull, Solitude, Yorion in hand. So the hand is absolutely full. I'm curious if what Brian has in hand. Response with Brainstorm, I think 3 cards in hand. Yeah, let's see. I don't expect counter magic against Death and Taxes too much. So yeah, this resolves and Leyline Binding gets rid of not the germ, but Batterskull. And so the germ is a 0/0 dice to state-based actions. Okay, untap. Yeah, we know what we're drawing because we just brainstormed. And let's brainstorm again. So how much, so you as a player, especially a veteran, Hall of Famer, how much do you read into the opposing player's mannerisms, confidence? Because I saw Brian tilt his head a little bit when brainstorming. Would you read into it as a sign of weakness, or you just play the cards?
I think there's so much going on in Legacy that if somebody makes a face, that it could just mean 17 different things. Oh, I didn't draw the land that I wanted. I didn't draw the Force of Will that I wanted. There's just too many things that at this point could be irrelevant. There is the Triumph of St. Catherine, I believe, miracled off the top of Brian's deck.
Yeah, exactly. It is indeed a Triumph. Played 3 copies in Brian's deck list, 5/5 life linker, but immediately gets taken care of by Solitude. Land deployed, pass the turn, Brian at 7, and Gabriel is up a game here.
Solitude is one of the better ways to deal with Triumph of St. Catherine.
Also with Uro, with Murktide. Actually, yeah, pretty decent card. Okay, I think I have found the best interaction I could for this whole day, but let me just double check that. Because I think you can use the ring tempts you from some to make a creature legendary, for example, Solitude, and then bounce it back with Caracas.
Wow. Yeah, that is very cool. Yeah, that is very cool.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how this works. So yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, these are the little things that matter in Legacy. This is why the format specialists could very often be better picks than, the world's best player in general when it comes to Magic and strategy and thinking about Magic cards. There's just so much in Legacy that you really need the practice to know what you're doing.
Yeah, and now we've got Lion Sash eating away at the graveyard, so a white scavenging ooze, if you will. Yeah, Brian is in a really, really bad position. Now we know he's got more leyline binding, so he can get this under control, but there's also Yorion potentially coming down. Now, another question to you, Martin. Would you walk up your vial up to 5 to have Yorion always available?
Yeah, that depends. It depends on my hand. It depends on what exactly I'm trying to achieve. What are the cards that I want to put into play at the end of my opponent's turn, as opposed to, do I want to just play them on my own turn? Does it really matter? Yeah, lots of decisions. It's funny how the Death and Taxes deck, you're kind of, if you look at the list, you're like, okay, well, there's a lot of creatures in either Violet, right? So you're just going to be sort of playing on your own turn and curving out. But there's so many interactions, like Samwise getting his wasteland, like you mentioned, the ring time 2 mechanic, making something legendary, using Karakas to bounce it. There's so much play to it, so much more than just a white aggro deck.
And we see the fourth Leyline Binding come down. So while it's good for Brian to stabilize, now Gabriel knows for a fact there aren't any more bindings, and I think he just shuffles with Stoneforge. Failed to find action. Just plays as a 1/2 creature. And then 5 mana Yorion. And then picks up his deck and then says, nah, I don't need to do that, so I won't. So yeah, it's just Stoneforge and Yorion. Unfortunately, it's just short of lethal. 5 damage on the battlefield against 6 life points. Oh, Lorien revealed. Ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. Let's go. Tracker goes up 5. And we're mid round 3.
So Prismatic Ending deals with the Stoneforge Mystic, but that still leaves the Yorion in play. So 4 damage coming through for Gabriella, possibly this turn, puts Brian at 2 life. So the clock is ticking, and Brian's going to need to draw an answer next turn.
Yeah, I'm curious if Gabriel has some reach, like like what, something that deals damage without combat. Let me just go through the deck list. I don't think there is going to be, but yeah, it's tough. I think he actually has to go through God Honest Combat there, but can make it tricky with like flash creatures.
All right,
So yeah,
Brian,
shuffling.
what's on the top?
Oh, Bowmasters. Bowmasters. Okay, I missed that. That's an excellent way to deal direct damage. But that doesn't deal 2. So it's almost okay. Brainstorm.
There's a Hydroblast in Brian's hand. Can you try to think of the cards he's boarding that for? As we mentioned before, you need to board against your opponent's game 2 deck, not their game 1 deck. So they're black-white in game 1, but Brian being a legacy expert knows what's going on. So what do you think he's bringing that Hydroblast for?
Yeah, he wants to isolate himself from losing to Bloodmoon. And it allows him to play, because you can still play, or Magus of the Moon, you can still play any duel you want, get Magust, and then use colorless mana to fetch out an island from Lorien Revealed at any point, then play Island Hydroblast.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably the way he wants to approach this. Now we see another triumph of Saint Catherine. I think Endurance in hand. He responds by destroying a land, float mana, classic, and play Endurance. So double creature with Catherine having lifelink, respond. Oh my god, what's going on?
Well, Endurance does have reach. That's the important part here. Endurance would be able to block, but otherwise Yorion, can fly through the Triumph because it doesn't have a way to block the flyer. But looks like Gabriella has the removal spell, gets rid of the reach creature, and wins the match, moves on to 2-1. Congratulations to him.
Yeah, so the actual card flashed in with Vial was Canoptech Scarab Swarm from Warhammer, which is a flying creature that exiles a graveyard and then gives you a 1/1 flyer for each land or artifact. So considering it's a fetchland format, you probably have exiled, let's say, 6 or 7 cards, get a bunch of tokens, and win on the swing back. So I'm not sure if Warhammer cards are on Modo. So if you're a Modo player, you may not have seen St. Catherine or Canoptech, but here in paper we see them go, fight head on. Excellent round. Wow.
Exciting matches. Our Lorien revealed draw count is on whatever it is now.
5.
But yeah, thanks for watching. That was round 3. We will be back after a short break. We're gonna take 3 to 5 minutes. We will be back with round number 4. Stay with us.